Hi, this is Mr. Ward. I'm going to do a few videos on how to deal with completion of the square part 2. So you might be dealing with a question like 1a or a question like 3a. They're fairly similar in structure. And I'm going to talk about 2a separately because it involves fraction-y stuff. But what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to figure out how to make this x squared plus 10x plus 15 into a perfect square so that later on you can factor it into its perfect square factored form and get the square root of both sides and come up with the two solutions. So I'm going to walk through a couple of examples that are similar to 1a and 3a. So I'm going to start with this one right here. And let's see here. Actually, I just have one example. I might make one more. So let's start off. The first thing I would recommend doing, just for simplicity's sake, because this plus 11 can throw you off. You could leave it there. Once you get good at this, you can skip this step. But I would subtract 11 from both sides just to begin with. Once you notice that you have a lead coefficient of 1, well, we'll come to that in a second. I would just subtract 11 from both sides just to have this x squared minus 8x all by itself. Okay. So I'm going to do that. So this just becomes x squared minus 8x equals 76 minus 11, which is going to be 65. Now you take a look and you say, okay, my lead coefficient is 1, so I don't have to worry about any factors that are going to mess things up in the beginning of this thing. All I have to worry about is what would I add to this to make this a perfect square. And the place that I look is the middle coefficient. I'm going to take that middle coefficient and I'm going to get half of it. And then I'm going to square that half of it. So I'm going to get 8. It's going to be, well, technically it's negative 8 over 2. And then I'm squaring that. And of course, negative 8, and I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Negative 8 over 2 squared. And by the way, if you do it this way, you'll keep all your stuff organized. Do it in one step at a time. I'm going to copy pasta that and put it in here. Now we'll clear up what this negative 8 over 2 is. So negative 8 over 2 is negative 4. And when we square negative 4, that's 16. Okay. Now over here, I'm going to go ahead and clean it up inside the parentheses, but I'm going to leave it alone. I could, if I wanted to, turn that into 16, but my practice is to leave that alone because it helps me remember what the factor is going to be. And I'll come to that in a second. So my next step is to simplify the right side. 65 plus 16 is going to be 81. Okay, now we're ready to factor on the left side. Since I left this as the square root inside the parentheses, when I factor this, I know that it's going to be x minus 4 squared. So the whole thing factors as x minus 4, put parentheses around that, and square it. Then I'm going to get the square root. Actually, let me undo what I just did. I'm going to get the square root, fill that in, and the square, get the square root. Let's see if I can make this actually happen. The square root of that, and that makes an interesting graph there when I have it all by itself. And I'm going to get the square, make that equal the square root of 81. Okay, that is just x minus 4 because the square root of a square cancels out the square, and that's going to equal 9, but x minus 4 will also equal negative 9 because there's 2 square roots of 81. Then I'm just going to add 4 to both sides to get rid of the minus 4. Okay, let me actually do this in a second cell so that I can give you these notes. Okay, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides. Okay, plus 4, plus 4. And that's going to just be x equals 13. And then the other one has to be solved too. So I'll add 4 to both sides. So x minus 4 plus 4 equals negative 9 plus 4. And so x will be all by itself. And on the right side, it'll be negative 5. So my solutions for this are 13 and negative 5. I'll put that in here right now. 13 and x equals negative 5. Okay, I'm going to pause. I'm going to get you another example to work through. Okay, I've created another example here. So x squared plus 20x minus 9 equals 35. All right, step one, I'm going to isolate the x squared plus 20x. I'm going to do that by adding 9 to both sides. And when I do that, it'll make it a little simpler for me to figure out what I've got to add to this to make it a perfect square. 35 plus 9 is 44, and negative 9 plus 9 is nothing. And now I've got to figure out what am I adding to both sides. So I'm going to look at my first term, my lead coefficient is 1, so I'm not worrying about things being doubled or tripled or something. So all I got to do is figure out half of 20, and I got to square that. So I'm going to say half of 20, so 20 over 2, which will be squared. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. Okay, now on the right side, I'll go ahead and simplify that and make that. That's 10. 20 over 2 is 10, and 10 squared is 100. On the left side, I'm just going to leave it inside there because it'll help me remember what my factors are. So when I factor the left side, I'm going to end up with x plus 10 squared. So that's what I'm going to simplify the right side. So the right side is going to become 144. And on the left side, I'm going to end up with x plus 10 squared. And then I'm going to get the square root of both sides. So square root of x plus 10 squared. And that's going to equal the square root of 144. So that's just going to be x plus 10 because the square root of a square, it cancels each other out. And I'm going to have that equal either 12 or x plus 10 equals negative 12. And then it's just a simple one-step problem to solve. I'm going to subtract 10 from both sides. So when I subtract 10 from both sides here, x will equal 2. Okay, so x plus 10 minus 10 equals 12 minus 10. Okay, and so x equals 2. And then here I'm going to subtract 10 from both sides as well. X plus 10 minus 10 equals negative 12 minus 10. And minus 10. And so x is going to equal negative 22. And so my solutions are, for this, my solutions are 2 and negative 2. So x is 2 and negative 22. And I think that's a good place to stop. I hope that was helpful.